And the gospel reading from Luke chapter 14. I'll read 1 through 14. One Sabbath, Jesus went to dine at the house of the ruler who belonged to the Pharisees, and they were watching him. And behold, there was a man before him who had dropsy. And Jesus spoke to the lawyers and the Pharisees, saying, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they were silent. Then he took him and healed him and let him go. And he said to them, "Which of you, having a son or an ox that has fallen into a well, will not immediately pull him out on the Sabbath day?" And they could not reply to this. Now he told a parable to those who were invited. Then he marked how they chose the places of honor, saying to them, "When you are invited by anyone to a marriage feast, do not sit down in a place of honor, lest more eminent person than you be invited by him. Any who invited you both will come and say to you, 'Give place to this man,' and then you will begin with shame and to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, 'Friend, go up higher.' Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Well, I can tell my wife when I get home today and that my preaching made people fall down on the floor, so that's good. Have you ever heard of the Latin phrase, imitatio Christi? I hope I get that right. It's been translated the imitation of Christ, and there was a famous book about that called The Imitation of Christ. It was written by Thomas à Kempis in the mid-1400s. Now, Thomas à Kempis was what they called a German canon. He lived in a monastery, he preached, he wrote, he handmade copies of the Bible. If you notice the date, we had printing started around Martin Luther's time in 1517. So this was about 100 years before that. And he wrote this famous book that people are still reading today, and it's about the issue of us as Christians imitating the life of Christ. And of course, at his time, this was really, really a big deal. People wanted to live like Jesus and all this sort of thing, exactly like him. And one of the great issues of imitating Christ was being humble. Everyone has to deal with the issue of being humble in their Christian life. Are you okay? Oh, it's on the phone. Okay. Now, we may deal with it well, or we may deal with it badly, but we all got to deal with it. When I wrote this sermon, it was about 35 years ago. Well, now it was 45 years ago. I wrote this about 10 years ago. I was at a festival with the youth group, and we were there that evening. We were in Kansas, and I was a youth pastor at the Paola Baptist Church in Paola, Kansas. And if you ever go to Kansas City and you go straight south about an hour, you're going to end up in Paola. And Paola, Kansas, the big deal was to drive around the city square at night and yell and scream, and then go home and plow fields for wheat. Okay, that was a big thing. So we went and we saw this singer, and it was Mac Davis. Now, for all of your older folks, maybe not your younger folks, Mac Davis was a superstar at that time, and his songs were on the radio, and I didn't even know he was going to be there that day. He had a variety show on television, and he sang this song, and the whole crowd was singing along at this time. So he begins his song with this little presentation. It goes, he says, "Back a few months ago, I was headlining one of the biggest nightclubs in the country, and they put me up a couple of days early." He says, "I came in early, and they put me up in what they call the Star Suite." And he says, "And now here I am, headlining the biggest club in the country, biggest nightclub, and I wake up 8 o'clock in the morning all by myself." And the whole crowd goes, "Oh." And he goes, yeah, aw. He said, but I did what I've always done to cheer myself up on a time like that. I picked up my guitar and I sat down and I wrote a little song. Now, he said, this is how it feels to be alone at the top of the hill and trying to figure out why. So we sang the chorus. Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. I can't wait to look in the mirror because I get better looking each day. To know me is to love me. I must be a hell of a man. Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble, but I'm doing the best I can. Okay, so everybody is singing. There's thousands of people who are singing this song, and then he sings the lines. I used to have a girlfriend, but I guess she just couldn't compete with all those love-starved women who kept clamoring at my feet. Well, I could probably find me another, but I guess they're all in awe of me. Who cares? I never get lonely because I treasure my own company. Now he goes on for one more. He says, and it moves into a minor chord, from that. And he says, I guess you could say I'm a loner, a cowboy outlaw, tough and proud. Well, I could have lots of friends if I wanted, but then I wouldn't stand out in the crowd. Some folks say I'm egotistical. Well, I don't even know what that means. I guess it has something to do with the way that I fill out my skin-tight blue jeans. Oh, Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. And it goes on. It's a fun song. And a lot of you know it by heart and that sort of thing. But it's great fun, My youth group and the crowd and so many today even love that song because it strikes a chord, You feel that chord in our lives, something that's so very important. I want to be humble, but some days I don't do so well. I have friends that will not allow themselves to be humble. They wall themselves off from in their houses, their lives, their businesses. Humility is just not something that's part of their lives. And Jesus spoke about this in the New Testament reading that we heard this morning. My wife often says to me, Homer, she says, your friends are crazy. And I said, yes. And I said, if I didn't have crazy friends, I wouldn't have any friends. So I have friends that they just have a hard time with being humble, Jesus liked to talk about things that people could relate to. Concrete things, everyday things. So this time, the setting that he chooses is being invited to a wedding. But he goes to the home of a prominent Pharisee to have a meal. Now, it was the Sabbath day, so Jesus had probably been preaching that morning, and it usually was the accepted practice that the main Pharisee would invite the visiting pastor or preacher to their home to have a meal in the evening. Now, I grew up at the end of the time when the minister would get invited out to people's homes after service to have a meal either at lunch or at the supper time. I can't tell you how many chickens have sacrificed to, You ever heard of those rubber chicken dinners? I've had a lot of them. Poor chickens, I'll tell you, they're gonna be after me when I die. But anyway, he's invited out, and so he is there at this place, and all the prominent religious people are there. And so he's invited over. Now, the writer Luke points out that this is no occasion for rest, celebration, or relaxation. Nobody's going to say nice things at this dinner. And I'll bet you any money that Jesus didn't even eat or drink there. Have you ever been you've been invited to a dinner and things just didn't go well at all? And things got tough. And you came home that night and you felt that rubber chicken in the bottom of your stomach. And you're like, oh man, this is awful. Just a lump there. Well, probably Jesus didn't eat. He is being watched closely because they want to find something against him to accuse him of something. So the story starts, there was a man with dropsy. Now, as I understand it, dropsy is an accumulation of fluids for different medical reasons, very serious in that day. And this man is not there by chance. Of course, it is a setup to see if they can bring some charge against Jesus. Now, you have to remember their law. So, if a person got hurt on the Sabbath, if it was serious, you tended to it, okay? If it wasn't serious, if it could wait till the next day, you waited because you didn't do work on the Sabbath. It had to be really serious. So maybe if you just broke one bone in your leg, I'd wait. I was a doctor. I'd wait till tomorrow to set it. And you're like, well, thanks a lot, you know? And so Jesus makes also the other thing. He says, if any of you had a son or an ox, come back, come back. If you have a son or ox, you know, if he fell into a hole, okay, yeah, it's okay. She's opening and closing the door. You know, wouldn't you take him out, that sort of thing? You know, how more important are those things? Well, usually Jesus waits for them to make the first move, you know, so he can counter what's happening. But this time, Jesus does not wait. He makes the first move. And he asks the Pharisees and experts in the law, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? Okay? It's not a black and white, but most of the time they would say no. Well, then Jesus accused them of being cruel and unhelpful and all that kind of stuff. And they won't answer him. They refuse. And Jesus reaches, well, I don't know if he reaches out or not, but he heals the man. It is a mighty miracle. I mean, the guy's healed instantly. And everybody recognizes it. You know, it would be something today we would rejoice. We would be jumping up and down, you know. And so it is a mighty miracle. This person is healed. He is made whole. It changes his life forever. But the Pharisees are unmoved. Not just the Pharisees, but all the people at the house that day. And I'm sure that Jesus is getting angry. But he needs the leaders to learn about humility. Humility can change lives. It can heal wounds. It can bring people together. It can make peace. And so Jesus tells a short story about going to the wedding feast. And all these men have been to 100 wedding feasts and probably saying to themselves, what can this young rabbi possibly teach us about weddings? To them, honor and shame was everything. You know, so Jesus talks about honor and shame. It's something they understood all too well. These men were used to having the best places, not only at weddings, but everywhere else they were invited to. They were the leaders of the community. People went for them for advice, you know, for all things. They looked up to them. These older men had paid their dues. And Jesus sees these men picking out places of honor at his meal, you know, at the meal. So he decides to teach them. He says that when you go and you're invited, don't pick out the places of honor. You know, take a lower spot. And if the people of the wedding want to move you up, let them move you up. And you were very honored at that point. Because if you take the best places and somebody else comes in who's more important, you're going to be sitting out in the hallway with the children at the kids' table. So, and then Jesus hits them with the punchline. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. And we know in life, it seems like it doesn't always work that way. But so often, you know, we need to be worried about what God thinks and what God wants for us. It's not just about weddings or church dinners. It's a spiritual truth that operates in our life. If you truly want to be exalted by God, you've got to learn to humble yourself, not just before the host of the wedding feast, but of the Lord Almighty. So many years ago, I went to Atlanta, Georgia, and I was at the George Dome. I'm not sure if it's still there or not, but it was Promise Keepers, the men's group, and it was the ministers' greeting. It was the biggest meeting of ministers in the world that ever happened. 45,000 ministers from across the nation, all denominations came together, and they met for several days studied and worshiped and all kinds of things. It's a great event. I wasn't sure what to expect, but it was really something. So they invited the most prominent television evangelists and huge church pastors that lived in the country at that time. It was about 20-some years ago. So there they were, and I know I've probably told you about this before, but they were up on stage and had some of the best music, and I mean, the spotlight hit them, and I know that every one of those guys had a gold Rolex. You know, when I was a kid, I always wanted a Rolex. Now that I'm older, I don't want a Rolex. I have what do I have? I got Timex. Keeps great time. Well, anyway, they're up there. I mean, their suits cost $500 if they cost a nickel, you know, and they must have gone to the spa because their faces were flawless, and, you know, they just looked like $1,000,000. And then they invited out the pastor, and I just started to got to know him, Rick Warren. He is the pastor of the largest Southern Baptist church in America. It's in California. And he wasn't up on stage with them. He was in the back. He comes out, and he's walking, and he's kind of heavy, you know, he's got on a Hawaiian shirt, he's got on shorts and sandals, and he wears glasses. And he goes waddling out. And most everybody knew him, and he waved to everybody and said, "Hi, how you doing?" and all this kind of stuff. And he's really a great minister. And in front of all these ministers who have these huge ministries, and they sell these tapes and books and all this kind of stuff, Rick Warren goes, "Hey, if you get anything of mine, I want you to just use it for free." He says, "The only thing you got to do is this." He says, the first time, by the way, Rick Warren wrote the most popular published Christian book in the world other than the Bible, Purpose-Driven Life, actually. And he says, "You want to use anything of mine? I give you permission free." He said, first time you use it, say, Rick Warren said. He said, the second time you use it, you go, "I've heard it said," and this third time you use it, you go, "I say unto you," which I've used a lot of times. It's been a lot of fun. Those other guys, all the money guys behind him, I thought they were going to drop dead. Oh, my goodness. There wasn't a whole lot of humility going on, man. You could see money just going out the window, you know, kind of thing. Such is the ministry, I guess. Well, being humble. You know, and humbling yourself. The situation is unique to you, to your situation. It won't be like your neighbors or your spouse or your co-worker or your parents, whatever. We are asked to go the second mile, bear the burden, stay the extra hour. If you humble yourself, you may think that people will take advantage of you, and sometimes that does happen, I'm sure. But in all this, be assured of this one great thing: the Lord sees you, and the Lord loves you. The Lord is never blind to your situation. Jesus says these words to each of us: "For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." Take courage in this, in your walk with the Lord. He will exalt you when the time is right, in God's timing. The Lord is always true to his word. Learn what it is to be humble. Give yourself, be kind, be loving, bear the burden in Christian love. Rest assured, you have a great reward waiting for you. You will also receive blessing now as the Lord determines it. Humility brings with it contentment, love, fulfillment in so many great ways by the hand of the Lord. Friends, let us bow our heads in a word of prayer. Well, Father, we thank you for this day and this time and this Labor Day, and may we be yours in all that we do. And, O Lord, teach us to be humble, that we may serve you and to serve your children in the world and throughout the world. And all God's children said, Amen.